Well, greetings, everybody, and welcome to Circle of Fellows. This is the monthly conversation that a group of IABC Fellows convene in order to have around a theme related to organizational communications. All fellows of the International Association of Business Communicators. Yeah, I know it's an unusual time for us to be having this conversation, but Ritzy, I understand it's just after 11 p.m. in the Philippines. So we're very grateful that you're able to join us at this hour, and that's why we're doing it now. For those of you who are watching live and in real time, you have the ability to ask questions, share comments, observations through the YouTube live chat feature. Just send that question along and I can display it on the screen. We can interrupt what we're talking about and talk about what you want to talk about. It's always nice to have this be a viewer-driven program. Today we're talking about the crossroads of communication, counsel, and ethics. I know a lot of people view the communication function as a very tactical one in which we're doing a lot of writing and video production and photography and assembling everything from intranet sites to press releases to putting press briefings together and all of those things that we think about in terms of the day-to-day activities in organizational communication. But at its core, we need to be providing counsel to the leaders of the organization because they're communicating too. Everybody in the organization is at some level communicating, particularly as we see this growing movement toward employee advocacy. And somebody once told me that CEO should stand for customers, employees, and owners because their primary job is telling the company story to those stakeholder audiences. So we need to be providing that counsel, and as a part of that, we need to be their North Star for ethical behavior in the organization. A lot of times that's not as easy for people to identify when something may be perceived as unethical as you may think. We have an excellent panel of IABC Fellows and professional communicators to address this topic, minus one who has not joined us yet, but if and when she arrives, we'll just bring her right into the conversation. But in the meantime, let's go round and have you briefly introduce yourselves, and we'll go clockwise as I see you, which means we'll start with Ritzy.
Thank you, Shell. Hi to everyone. I'm Ritzy Villarico Ronquillo. I'm here in the Philippines. I'm with IABC Philippines. I've been an IABC member since 1991. So this is my 43rd year in the field. And I've been through communication, corporate communication in energy and manufacturing, as well as I currently teach strategic communication planning and management. So I'm very, very happy to be with a very distinguished panel today. So thank you.
Thank you, Ritzy. And Jennifer, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here early in the morning on the West Coast, as is the case for a few of us. I am in Vancouver, Canada, and where I own my own storytelling agency and teach at the School of Business at the University of British Columbia. I'm also chair of IABC's Global Ethics Committee, so this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Happy to be here today.
Glad you're here too. And it is a West Coast heavy panel today, but not you, Amanda. How are you this morning? Or this evening?
It's actually it's late afternoon for a change in South Africa. I am from Amanda Hamilton Atwell from Pretoria, South Africa, and I am chair of the Africa region at the moment, and I've had my own business for 22 years now, Business DNA, and we do communication strategies, a lot of research, and we also do tactics like reduce publications. And I'm actually sitting in a conference room at the moment where I've just given a paper on getting strategic with your measurements. So I'm always delighted to be here. And I think ethics is such an important thing. Sorry for talking so long, but the session that was just before my session this afternoon dealt with crisis communication, and it was a case study in South Africa where it was such an ethical issue. It was a life insurance company that was involved. Very interesting.
Very interesting. And Tosh, you are on the West Coast.
I am. Hello, everyone. So great to be here with this distinguished panel. I'm so honored. Perhaps a little explanation. Many of the IABC members know me as Todd Hattori. I'm honoring my heritage and using my middle name, Tosh, which is short for Toshiharu. I am currently the principal for continuous improvement for a company called F5 that's based out of Seattle, Washington. I live in Seattle, Washington. And we do data trafficking and security for network security for many, many organizations throughout the world. I have previously been involved in the ethics committee and the international IABC board. And so this topic is very, very important to me, not only in my current role, but I previously was a consultant, and I can share some insights on what's the difference between being a consultant from the outside as well as being a consultant on the inside.
Great. Look forward to that. And Marianne, you're not too far from the West Coast.
That's true. I'm in Reno, Nevada. And I'm executive director of the Washoe County Medical Society. Like many of the panel, I've had my own consulting practice in the past for nearly 40 years before Medical Society here made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I'm able to employ many of the communication experiences and techniques that I've gained over the years to help physicians raise their visibility in the community, and also help them learn to use many of the social media, which is quite the challenge here. But anyway, moving on.
And increasingly a challenge, as it turns out.
Yes.
And I think I neglected to introduce myself. I'm Shel Holtz, IABC Fellow. I am the Senior Director of Communications at WebCore, which is a commercial general contractor and builder headquartered in San Francisco and operating throughout California. And let's jump into this topic. We do want to spend a lot of time talking about that role of counseling leaders on ethics, addressing those challenges and those issues. But before we get to that, we have to get to the point where leaders are listening to the counsel of their communicators in general. And a lot of organizations bring communicators on to do that tactical stuff of delivering the messages that need to be delivered to make sure that the wheels of communication are spinning in the organization and teams are sharing and we're crossing those organizational boundaries so that knowledge and information is shared, and that leaders are hearing from employees, facilitating that two-way communication. That does not necessarily mean that there is a chief communication officer or some kind of equivalent that has a seat at the table with those leaders, nor does it mean that they're coming to us to say, here's a decision we're thinking of making. Is that going to be perceived as an appropriate or an ethical decision? How do you get there?
In some companies with great difficulty. I have always subscribed to the theory it's better to be thrown out of the room than wait at the door and asked to be invited. I've been thrown out on occasion, but I've also found that if you create a conversation with those leaders about what they expect to have happen when they do something in particular, whether they've brought you into the room ahead of time, or as happens often, they've got a problem and they stew around with it, and then they said, oh, gee, we better get the communicator involved. One of the questions I've always liked to ask them, and have found pretty effective, is say, what do you want to have happen if you do X? And I think my colleagues will probably have some similar examples of, they come to you with a list of things they think we should do, because most people who are not professional communicators understand tactics. They don't understand the strategy behind them.
Mhm.
They don't understand the need for objectives. They bring you in the room and they say, oh, Marianne, we need a press conference, or we need an e-blast, or we need this, that, or something else. So you have to talk them through that and get them back up to the level where you're talking about the issue and what you want to have accomplished when the communication is complete, and get them out of that tactical mode. And that can be very difficult at times.
Mary Ann, the question on how do we actually get to that level is, I think that the most important thing is to be prepared and to be proactive. That if you do not know the industry, if you do not know what's going on in the organization, and you're not proactive in what you recommend, they're not going to believe you. So my suggestion of my tactic, my strategy to get into the room, if they want to throw me out, it's fine, Marianne, but is to do these two things and then really make my voice heard.
Just to build, Marianne, on what you were saying, I love the idea of going into every situation asking questions, and I think one of the questions that leaders I've worked with have, to your point about what's the action or reaction you're looking for out of the press conference, or to kind of drill deeper, is when we are able to push the question into the business outcome, which is what all communication professionals kind of hold as a bit of a North Star, to use your term, Shell. But when we can show our results and our efforts linked to business goals that are important to them and therefore to us, and help create a link. And I'm passionate about storytelling, so connect the dots on the story between those two things that help people get engaged along the way. I've just found that more often that keeps you in the room than gets you thrown out.
Yeah, I would add to, in addition to business outcome, is understanding potential business risk. So I'll share some wise words from an astute leader that I work with, who said, sometimes I forget that most people are not in the same meetings that I'm in. They're not hearing the same conversations. And so I jumped to the conclusion that everyone is at the same place where I am. And so being able to come to the table and share, here's what I'm hearing throughout the organization. Here's concerns that employees have. Here's how it will impact the current work, or potentially introduce risk to where we are going as an organization. Helps leaders understand that, sometimes we think outcomes are so far out there, but what are the potential immediate risks that could negatively impact the organization, our employees, and our customers?
In my case, I've found my niche in technology companies, or in companies where communication is not core. So you have like in energy and in manufacturing. So therefore, I guess that's a plus in a way, because they know they're taking in someone with a competency that is going to add on to what they have. And they will defer to you because they know that that's not their area of expertise. I found it helpful if, number one, we clear out early on what is the role we have to play. What is your expectation of me? Should I do this or do that? I think that has to be really clear, especially with the CEO. It helps that you really know where in the organization you are. And if there are too many layers, then you kind of know already how many filters you'll have to go through. That's one. Second is the competency we bring to the table has really got to be something they badly need, so that then, whether it's in good times or in bad, they know you're there. I also found it helpful that you have to talk their talk. So if they speak in jargon, they speak in numbers or whatever it is that keeps them awake at night. You just simply have to understand that and think like them. Think like CEO, think like the CFO, whoever it is you have to work with, and solve the problem. Be the go-to person. There will come a time, because like I was in an energy company, so there were always crisis moments, whether it be rates or whether it be a typhoon or a hurricane that will render big swaths of areas with no electricity at all. So be there. Be the person who can offer immediate assistance and who can give opinions and advice down the road. But I also found out that being a good communicator, not only in speaking, but especially in writing, and being able to grasp immediately what exactly the top leaders need to understand and know, and being able to translate it into terms that are understandable to stakeholders, translate their highly technical terms into understandable terms, and enable some peace to happen among the stakeholders, whether customers, the regulators, and all. I think that that's when they know you are the go-to person. It helps to be really clear about what you're there for. So, and when the need arises, rise to the occasion. Do not shirk from the responsibility. Be there and work so hard. Roll up your sleeves. Go with the guys. Go to the field. Go to the gemba. Whatever it takes, and they will know you mean business and you're the go-to person.
Yeah, Ritzy, I couldn't agree more with you about, in particular, speaking the language. I was just having this conversation the other day with somebody who was using the term ROI as the sort of generic definition of producing results. What's the ROI of our communication campaign? And I said, please don't use that term with your leaders, because when they're in the boardroom or the executive committee room, ROI is an accounting term. It has a very specific meaning. It is a very well-defined formula. And if you use that term in that room with them, when you leave, they're all going to look at each other and go, that person doesn't know what ROI is, and laugh. Right? And I think it's hard to build credibility if you don't know the language of leadership. And interestingly, I got pushback on that. Oh, that's one definition of ROI, right? But the other thing I find that works is not waiting to be asked to get into the room. Oh, I understand you're going to be talking about your plans for X at your next meeting. I think I should be there, and see if you can just force yourself in. Have any of you ever done that? Just intruded?
Yeah. Some of my best buddies at work were actually analysts, engineers, analysts, because they know that there is a side to what they do. There's a communication side. So after, it's like a whole room of like what, 10, 20 people, all very brilliant technical people. And then they put in all their thoughts, and you have to come out with just one document to be submitted to the regulator or for the customers. And they know you're the person who's going to merge it, who's going to put it together, who's going to fine tune it. But you really have to spend time earning that respect.
Yeah, I'm curious. Ritzy talked about asking leaders, "What do you want of me? Let me be really clear on what your expectations are of me." I've actually worked with quite a few leaders that couldn't answer that question. I mean, when they think about communication, many people say, "Well, we all communicate, so just do what you need to do as a professional communicator." So I think it's really important to, Shell, to your question, do you enter the room without being invited? Absolutely, because I think there's an education piece, helping people understand what is strategic communication versus tactical communication. and helping your leaders understand that having a seat at the table and being a participant in the conversations that are driving strategy will deliver better communication than sitting on the sideline waiting for the leaders to come to you saying, here's what we want to communicate. There's a greater push now for understanding. We kind of go in phases where we went from understanding the different audience segments and customizing your communications to those audiences to let's go to a more general, let's speak in very easy terms so that everyone understands. Now we're kind of going back to we need to understand the nuances of each of our audiences to make sure that the communications are relevant to them. What is it that they need in order to understand or to take action or align on where we are going as an organization?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, like with any interpersonal relationship where we are asking someone to trust us, we build that trust, right? That trust is built before we get in the room, hopefully, in a best case scenario, and so that connection we can make, which I've often kind of, I guess my version of barging into the room is probably kind of, I don't know, infecting ideas with enthusiasm and how can we get there? How can we get to where you're going? And kind of helping create the narrative again around the story of where we're going in any particular situation, so that people can become part of that. When I teach storytelling, I talk about the evolution of storytelling having gone from an oral tradition, which is kind of nearly all of humankind, to the broadcast era, which was the idea of broadcasting one to many, and that we've come full circle back to a kind of an oral tradition, which is layered onto digital, which is that everyone owns ideas, and that messages move through virtual networks, and that is true with leaders as well, right? So how can we help them move messages through their networks toward a business outcome? Again, being strategic that way.
Yeah, I heard trust mentioned a couple of times, and I remember during one of these Circle of Fellows episodes, Jim Lukashevsky was talking about the seat at the table, and it was not a concept that impressed him. He said, "Where exactly is this table, and how many seats does it have?" His point was that you build that trust and you become that counselor by in the moment providing the counsel wherever you happen to be. It's not necessarily in those meetings, the scheduled,
Yes.
executive team meetings. And so it's thinking fast on your feet when you're with a leader and they're telling you something, or you're in a group where they're talking about something, and your ability to raise your hand or pull them aside and say, "Look, there's a communication challenge with this. Let's talk about this." I think you're setting yourself up for perhaps some ethical challenges. So with that, I'd like to shift over to the ethics side. I remember the Melbourne mandate, which is rather old at this time. At this point, I can't remember exactly
2012.
what year. It was 2012? Oh my God.
November 2012 in Melbourne.
It's coming up on 11 years. This was the organization that represents communication associations that got together in Melbourne and came up with more or less a model for the role of communication in the organization. And at the center, they said, we are the moral compass of the organization. We're the ones that are looking holistically at the organization, saying, what is the organization doing that is sending messages that convey something that is less than ethical or problematic from a morality or an ethical standpoint as it relates to business? I haven't heard a lot about it since then. How do you all think business is doing and communicators are doing at guiding the ethical behavior of organizations?
I think we're doing well. And because, yes, mistakes are being made. But in my world, I can see that communication professionals are definitely playing their part in creating this, being this moral compass of the organization. And, coming back to having the seat at the table, and the fact that I said be prepared and be proactive, my view, my advice to the people that I work with is first make a difference at your desk. Then you can try and make a difference at the board desk or the boardroom table. And so I think if we can just say, well, from the work, the responsibilities that we have in an organization, we do it in an ethical way. And my experience is that most communication professionals are very ethical, and they're very aware of the risk of miscommunication and providing half truth to the stakeholders.
I think having a regulatory body actually helps. But in the
Mm.
absence of that, there or say or laws that say are say like an anti-competition law, or some guidelines of the industry that the company is with. I think it's really helpful if the company itself has its own guidelines, has its own directives, and really trains its personnel to the people who really work within, and even sometimes the third parties or external suppliers are also subject to the same rules. And that I used to work for a company where we were all told about these rules. Every year we had to go through a online training. We had to finish it successfully, and then we would get the certificate. You miss out on it, no matter how good a worker you are, good a person you are at work, you get a suspension. So that was like the stick, not the carrot. And then part of the Securities and Exchange Commission uh, regulatory guideline was that the management committee, so every year, the management committee, we had to sit through a half day where we go through governance rules. And that goes from the chairman of the board down to every vice president or head of any functional group. And we sign in before and sign in after, just to make sure you really stay. So even if you're expats, you fly in, you have to attend that. Otherwise, you're not compliant with the law. So that's one. That's the stick. But the carrot is that we have a term which is actually Spanish, but we use it here. We call it palabra de honor. It's a word of honor, that if you as a communicator is has come to be known that you have a word of honor, if you give your word that yes, I will help you, or yes, this will be done, and if you have you are known to be someone of say wisdom that people can go to and talk some sense, knock some sense into people, then I guess that cements also your reputation within. And soon word goes around. Word of mouth is still very alive within a company, and they come to realize that they can trust you. They can go to you. You like even your own team members, even the president, even the team members can go to you and know that they can speak freely, and they know that whatever they tell you will not be used against them, especially if they are say gunning for promotion. These little things, these little practices actually cement the reputation that we make as communicators. The choice of words, the way we address people, the way we even look at them, our nonverbals actually defines us. And that's also when we don't know it, but the top management is always watching. Maybe the board of directors are not saying anything, but they are watching. They try to see what's going on. And then we have the pulse survey that employees can say whatever they want to say. They're asked questions. So it also helps that the communicator has a direct link to the CEO and to other top or is in the management committee so that you can discuss freely and give your thoughts. Of course, in a way in which it is fit to the person you're talking to. Some people you have gotta punch it. So other people you have to gently say it. Other people you have to time it. Is it after coffee or maybe after reading the newspaper if he still reads a newspaper? So it's really, I think, a whole lot depends on you as a communicator. You can really, because we're supposed to be good at reading people. And if we do it well enough, then we will know just when, just how, just what to say. And word goes around. I mean, we do know that word goes around and people will know if you're someone they can trust. If your door is open, and like I had my door was, I'd say it's always open. When someone comes in, regardless of rank, and he closes the door behind him or she closes the door behind her, I know there's a problem. So we sit down and we talk, and I tell that person, well, this is confidential. You can be assured that I will keep this in confidence. And they appreciate that. It's the little things that happens every single day, every single minute that earns us that respect, and they know they can trust us.
I think in today's environment, the job of a professional communicator is much more complicated than it has been in the past. With the proliferation of social media and where people can post things and in a minute it's international,
Mm.
it's challenging for the professional communicator within an organization to manage all the messages that are out there. So I think it's really important for communicators to stick to the facts, validate anything that they're hearing or seeing, and providing information back to your audiences, the justification, the data that back up the facts, to help people understand that you are there to provide truth and transparency. Within many organizations, employees have moved towards this, I need to know everything. And so even helping them understand, here's what you do need to know and why, here's what you don't need to know right now and why. So helping people have that background information to understand why you as a professional communicator within an organization is either sharing truthfully, honestly, thoroughly, or withholding because there are business reasons, potential risk in revealing too soon.
I have a question for everybody. Does having a message house still hold? Does it still help?
Ritzy, sorry, were you asking, does having a message
Yeah.
still help? Like
I
a
mean,
key
I mean a
message?
message house because there's isn't
Oh,
it some companies would, especially if they're going to have a campaign that's very going to be a very publicly maybe controversial one, they usually want to do a message house. Does that help? Do you think nowadays that still helps? I mean, especially as Tosh has just said, with social media, everything goes everywhere. So is that still helpful? I've seen some companies still do it, but would you recommend it?
I think the idea of having a set of key messages, I'm actually not familiar with the term message house, but
I just
but
looked it up, Jennifer. So the definition I just found is a message house is a method for increasing messaging discipline within your team. Consists of an outline of a house with messages inside. Simply tell your internal stakeholders to stay inside the message house when communicating about their project or organization.
okay, perfect. You learn something new every day from each other. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of sets of key messages that is not new in our profession, and I would certainly continue to. I certainly work with clients to underscore that. I like the idea of kind of reminding people to stay in a house, but as a sidebar and related to this, and a sort of a PSA for IABC's Code of Ethics or the Global Alliance's Code of Ethics, both of which are excellent documents. You know, many IABC members might not realize that when you renew your membership, you actually automatically renew your signature on IABC's Code of Ethics, which not only binds us because we have a degree of responsibility to our message houses and to our clients and to each other and to the world, because communication professionals carry quite a weight in that regard. But my greatest hope, I guess, for all of us is that it helps frame a set of guidances, a set of common principles that we all share, which no matter where you are in the world and whether you know terms, whether we share the same terminology or whatever the case may be, that we're all working toward the same principles around being consistent, responsible, ethical, legal, etc. So I think one way to your question, Ritzy, where those kinds of the concept of a message house can really be reinforced is in ensuring in advance that those messages hit those marks, that they are consistent, responsible, ethical, and legal, and so that we're guiding at least that very basic information.
I think
I'd say go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the important things we talk about a set of messages, whether they're in a house or however you think of them, which is that's a very interesting idea, and I like it, is that the messages fit the situation and they fit the audiences. And in this rapidly changing communication environment that Ritzy alluded to earlier in her original question, we need to be sure that those messages continue to evolve as they need to, as all of that information continues to speed up, because they will change as the situation changes. And one of the things that I have done in the spokesperson training that I've done over the years is to remind people, while you've got a core of concepts and messages, you still need to answer the question. And that's where the ethical dilemmas can come in if a spokesperson gets really focused on repeating a message that doesn't answer the question. So the messages need to be, I think, more fluid today than they used to be, because the timing of how communication progressed was much slower, way slower than when I started in the profession. And now they're just at warp speed. So the house needs to repaint its rooms every once in a while. And as communicators, we have a huge responsibility to make sure that they stay current and they stay appropriate to the audience, because not every audience needs or wants to hear the same message.
But Mary Ann, I feel that there are certain core messages that will stay true. So the walls of the house will be the walls of the house, but the interior decoration might change. And I think that's important, that when we create the narrative for an organization, that we ensure that the narrative can stay relevant for at least a year. And then as situations develop, we can put that in between the walls of the house. And Ritzy, thanks for the term. I love it.
You're absolutely right, Amanda. That's why I say you have to repaint a room one in a while. You're not rebuilding the house.
Tosh, I'm really glad you brought up social media, because I think it presents a number of challenges when it comes to ethics, because over the last several years, we've seen this polarization. It's evident here in the U.S. in society, but not just in the U.S. We've seen polarization across societies around the world. And what that has led to is different views of what is ethical. And everybody closely holds their belief that my view of what is ethical is the correct one. And it seems to me that an organization that may employ people from both sides of that spectrum and are also trying to sell their products or services to people on both sides of that spectrum are going to have to walk a tightrope of ethics. How does a communicator help counsel an organization through that kind of challenge?
I would say that there are many aspects to that one question. But when it comes to how do we talk about our business, how do we talk about our company, our products, our services, our customers, our employees, perhaps something like the message house would be useful because we can put some parameters on our expectations of how people are sharing information about the organization. Now, outside of the organization, people are perhaps going to express their personal opinions that get into more of the social community areas. And it's difficult to manage that. But I've worked for organizations where it's part of the culture where we set the expectation that you are a representative of this company. So regardless of whether you're in our building working or outside at a picnic or a church gathering or whatever it is, you are still a representative of the organization. So think very carefully about how you present yourself, the company, and the people, our customers. So I think from an ethics perspective, as an organization, the most we can do is to provide people guidance. How are you a responsible steward for the organization? And then we get into the whole maintaining employee commitment to the organization, embracing the culture, living the culture, so that they comply with any guidelines or parameters that we define for how to speak about the organization, our customers, our products and services.
My concern is that is there not a confusion between ethical behavior in an organization and the values of the organization? Shouldn't we say that in an organization we define the values, and this is our ethical behavior within this organization, and within a society this is the ethical behavior that we support. And because eventually, and what might be ethical in my culture might not be ethical in the organization that I work for. But shouldn't it be that if I work for company X and they say this is the values, this is the ethics of this company, then it doesn't matter if I think it's okay to do this in my culture. When I'm a representative, as Tosh said, of this company, this is how I should behave.
House rules. Right? I mean, the analogy carries through. It's great.
It's interesting, Jennifer, because we have house rules in IABC. It's the Code of Ethics. Every communication association I'm familiar with has a code of ethics, as do associations for other professions. And yet I don't know of an organization that has prepared a code of ethics. I've seen codes of conduct within departments, sometimes called codes of cooperation. But the closest thing I see to a code of ethics in organizations is their values statements. And in a lot of organizations, those are subjects of some derision because they're words that have been posted on the wall, but you don't see the leadership behaving consistently with those values. I'm very lucky in the organization I work for. Leadership, teams, projects, they test every decision against the values, and one of those values is trust. So it tends to turn out very well most of the time. But is there a role for us as communicators to either hold leadership's feet to the fire around the values or help redefine the values or establish them? I mean, how important is because a lot of people say, oh, values and purpose and mission and vision, just lots of foo-foo words. But is there value to us taking those seriously and dragging everybody else along?
Yeah, I've heard it from some employees when, these so snazzy posters were put out, art cards about the values. So they began asking, so how do we know we are complying or living the values? So then it became necessary for us to translate, of course, in tandem with HR, because internal comms sometimes resides with them and they have direct contact with all the employees, uh, to come out with manifestations. Or how do you operationalize it when you say truth? Or how do you operationalize it when you say integrity or productivity or teamwork? So we had to work and then put it down in translate it. So say what is this definition in our context, in our culture, and then give examples. So like what does, for example, productivity mean? It's say turning out this or that. Or if you are in a company that has it's a public utility with public service and customer service, then you could probably say we have a term in our language. We call it malasakit, which is uncommon. We call it, it's like uncommon concern for others. So we say because of that value, which is really stated as it was in our language in the list of values, we said how is this going to be realized in real life. One is that because we belong to a public service company, we have to be on call in times of duress, meaning if there is say a natural disaster, then certain offices were told they are frontliners, they will be on call. Our office, though we were not those going out on field exactly, but we would have shifts to attend to customer calls. So it's really important that it is operationalized, and the crafting of that, the choices of words, so that it is clear, it is simple, and yet it's not offensive, is also where the communicator now will come in. Work hand in hand with everyone else in the company. After all, we do not exist in a vacuum. We always work with others in the company. We have to work with legal to make sure it did not impede or go against the labor code. We had to work with HR to make sure it was fair, to make sure it did not also um, offend anyone. We had to so I think our role is really to be an enabler, to bring everything together and to operationalize it in terms that are understandable and acceptable for the company. And when it is that clear, then even top management is tied to that, because then, for example, as simple as say safety as the overarching value, then how was that operationalized? You do not walk on the corridor uh, with your looking at your phone or taking a call. You go to the side, you look at your phone and do your thing there, because you will be creating unsafe behavior. And the funny thing was that everyone took it to heart because it was that clear. It was so realistic. And so even and it was allowed that even rank and file, anyone could tell even the big boss himself, sir, excuse me, but it's unsafe. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And he goes to the side. Or say it was clear that safety as an overarching value was that if you're driving and you get a call, even it's from the global boss, you don't have to take it. You put your car to the side and then you call him maybe and say, I'm sorry, sir, but I was on the road, I was driving. And his reaction is supposed to be, oh, I'm sorry, I'm are you okay, are you safe? So then it creates that a very clear way, and that's where I think communicators are big help, is a big help. We are a big help for the company.
Shell, you asked about safe ethical training or training in ethics. I was part of an amazing project of a global company that every employee had to go through this code of ethics training. And it was started with a video of the um, general manager of the company, the CEO of the company, who told the people why it's important. And the people were actually audited. They had to sign the register and the employee number and the different functions were audited to, to see that all the people went through this ethical training. And what was amazing about this, it was they had the code of ethics, and then they had case studies, and the people had to in their groups say what would they do in this ethical situation, like accepting a bribe, and why would you? And then at the back of it, it was the explanation of why this behavior would be wrong, and it was very gray. Some things were very gray. Um, and like accepting a bribe when you are being threatened with a gun, so you either pay me or I shoot you. What do you do? So there are companies. I can assure you, I've been part of it.
That's great. Hey, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Shell, I was just going to build on the power of the workforce in all of what we're talking about. When and especially the up and coming workforce, and how that is already and will continue to shift the way we work as companies need to adapt to, frankly, hang on to those workforces. With my third year business students teaching business writing, they're honestly more clear on values than I probably was at that age. And I just yesterday met with a student who is looking for, quite hungrily looking for a summer internship position. And yet the company, the number one company that's offered him a position right off the top, he doesn't feel that his values align with that company's values. Interestingly, he came to show me a set of communications between he and someone in HR. And he didn't care for some of the tone and some of the way that she interacted with him. And he said, like, that's not me. That's not the way that I communicate. And I don't really like it when people communicate that with me. So, if this person is representing the organization I'm going to work for, I'm not sure I want to work there. And, he's hungry for a position, but he'll get 4 or 5 offers probably. And it was quite heartening to see him be filtering through the lens of values and those which align with his.
Now let me throw a real world ethical situation at you. It involves executives, and it's very recent. It's from the World Economic Forum in Davos that just wrapped up not that long ago. And there were headlines about leaders of organizations who were attending the World Economic Forum, whose time was limited, and in order to respond to emails, write emails, and craft speeches, they were using ChatGPT, which is the generative artificial intelligence chatbot. For people who haven't heard of it, where have you been the last 2 months? But, what would you have counseled an executive who came to you and said, I'm really busy, I'm going to have ChatGPT write this email or write this speech?
I would have said, wait a minute. Working with physicians, there's a number of communication channels that they don't use when they're dealing with work-related issues. And I think that this new artificial intelligence models present for physicians in particular a high risk for the artificial intelligence not being quite smart enough. So I would issue some warnings of caution of the kinds of things you want to communicate through that.
I agree with you, Mary, and I would definitely caution and tell them, do you really think that you will sound authentic by doing this? And, I would rather put my hand up and say, can I help?
I think it
I
gets
I
right
think
back
I
to the demonstration of the values. And so if an executive wants to take a shortcut, does that truly exemplify our values as an organization?
Exactly.
And from a trust and transparency perspective, if it leaks out that the executive is using uh, some other resource to generate his or her messaging, then all employees look to their leaders as examples, and if that's the example they want to set, then your entire organization is going to likely will model that type of behavior.
On the other hand, let me throw in a devil's advocate position. What if our response to that executive is great? That's a great idea. We are all pressed for time right now, and we're focused on perhaps some other issue. Let's use that interface to get us to a first draft, which in my observation is sometimes getting, landing drafts with the right inputs that are kind of, 60 to 70% of the way there. And then let's use our esteemed communication professionals to ensure that the messaging, the values, the voice, etc., that those things that the professionals can know best get woven in a way that elevates and ensures that the message is delivered ethically and consistently and authentically.
Okay.
I would. Sorry. Is someone
No.
going to go through? I was going to say that I would be curious. I'm always curious about new things that pop up. So I would, well, probably before, say, if I was with that CEO or that head of state, before that, would would it's understood that we're supposed to do environmental scanning of what's out there, and then of course we'd have a pre-departure briefing, or we'd put our strategy together. And if he mentions, I want to try chat gpt, so then I either myself or a team member or both of us would study it and try it out, and then try to see the pros and cons, and then get back to him and say, okay, here's what we found out: pros, cons. Is this in step with what you want? What are the connotations? What are the implications? And because you're a head of state, media is going to ask you questions. Are you ready to say you use chat gpt? And if he says, yeah, for I want to. All right. So either I talk him out of it or I go with it. But either way, we have to be prepared to answer questions why we use Chat GPT. I haven't tried it yet, though. My son uses it. He just tried it for he's a tech writer, so he's just, so I have a date with him to try it out, because I want primary data, not secondary. So I want to experience it first. But I would do that if he was my CEO or my or as head of state. I would prepare. I would tell him the pros and cons and see what is he ready to stand up for. And if he says, and if, for example, in our analysis, it's okay, then I'd say, all right, then let's prepare an answer in case somebody asks us at one of the media interviews, sir, I heard you use Chat GPT. Then we have to be ready with our question. Then we brief him and we have a Q&A session with our head of state or CEO so that he's ready to answer. If not, he refers the question. I'd like to refer you to my communication team. And so we should be ready with our answer. If it's not okay, then we drop it. We don't have to do it. But I like what Jennifer's also suggesting. It can be for a first draft, and then you can fine tune it with the rest of the communication team.
Yeah,
I
we'll
just think that tools are tools, so we just have to make them answer to us. not
Yeah,
the
we
other
will
way
need to
around.
have a circle of fellows just around the use of generative
Yeah.
AI in
That would be
communications.
interesting.
But we're out of time, I'm afraid. This
Wow.
hour has blown by, hasn't it? I do want to let everyone know about the next Circle of Fellows, which is scheduled for 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, March 16th. That would be to accommodate our colleague in Australia, Zora Artis, who will be joining us along with Diane Gajewski, Mary Hills, and Martha Muzichka on the topic of change management. One of my favorite themes, so I'm looking forward to that one. Watch for the official announcement of that with the link on where to join us. Thank you very much to all of you on the panel. It's been a thorough delight having this conversation with you. I wish we could go on another hour because there's plenty left to talk about. And of course, I do want to thank Anna Willie for her behind the scenes coordination of these events that would not happen at all without the hard work that she puts in, even though we never get to see her on screen. We'll have to fix that one of these days. But for all of you who have been watching live and those of you who are catching us on the podcast or the video replay, we hope that this has been of value to you, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Jed.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.